To see so many zombies here on a Friday afternoon, especially with a long weekend. So thank you again for staying around. And thank you to our speakers who have kindly been shuffled into this last track for the day. And again, really nice to see a full venue for the last three talks of the day. So to start off the session, we've got Tamil Mathi. Tamil has over 7 years of industry experience. He specializes in securing a range of ecosystems, including IoT, web, cloud, and mobile. He's a former Red Team member and a competitive CTF participant. And currently he's focused on revolutionizing medical device security. And that's what he's going to be talking about us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I cannot get any more excited. So today I'm going to be talking about life on the line, breaking into medical device by exploiting TE devices. So it's a technical deep dive, so brace yourself. Who am I? So I'm a senior product security engineer at Becton Dickinson Advanced Patient Monitoring, formerly known as Edwards Life Science. I have MS in cybersecurity from University of North Carolina, USA. So right now I'm focusing on secure design, making sure security is not an afterthought, but a foundational element in how we build systems. So especially focusing on secure by design principles in high-stake technologies and products like medical device. I also do red teaming. Used to be a Synac red teamer, so old habits die hard. So I still do bug bounty and CV hunting, and I have just started writing blogs. So they may not be good. I'm getting better at it. So read at your own risk. So agenda. So today I'll start with why medical device security matters. So it's not about data losses or financial or business reputation. It's about patient safety. So I'll also give quick intro on ARM Trust Zone, TE overview of the device architecture, and PKCS11, how it fits into this overall device architecture. Basically, it's going to make it easier for you to understand the exploitation techniques that will be followed after. I'll also touch on detection and monitoring strategies and what we can do about it to prevent these kind of attacks. I'll finally wrap up the presentation. Sorry about that. I'll finally wrap up the presentation with talking about challenges in enforcing strong security controls in medical devices. So what's stopping them from doing that? Okay, let's start there. More than 60% of connected medical devices in hospital have known vulnerabilities, according to CISA. So it means majority of the devices in hospitals are going to be exploited easily. Having said that, why medical device security matters? So if the device that's connected with the patient has security loopholes, so or the device is compromised because of poor security, so the consequences isn't just daunting or financial losses. So it's much more than that. It's about patient safety. For example, if the device, for example, in the case of patient heart monitor, so that if attacker could tamper the readings or values that's shown on the display, then it could lead to patient harm or such example like delay in treatment or incorrect treatment, or sometimes even death in case of pacemaker or implantable. If those devices are capable of accepting unauthorized commands, so that the result is catastrophic. So then comes typical data losses like page exposure. Then comes the typical regulatory consequences like FDA recalls, business reputation damage, etc. So let's look at the real case here. In 2017, there was this pacemaker that were already implanted in almost 500,000 people. So that device has got some vulnerability, allowing an attacker to remotely modify the heart pace, so of the patients that it was implanted on. So attacker could run the battery dry. So it means anybody with a laptop and with the knowledge of how to exploit this vulnerability could remotely trigger a heart attack. So the exact detail of this vulnerability were not disclosed, but the fix was released. But that wasn't even the main problem. So the real challenge started after that. So since it is implantable, so some patients would have to go through the invasive surgery to get the implants removed and update the firmware. So that's what makes it much more difficult, because some people wouldn't have survived that implantable surgery. So even though fix was issued, so it's not easy to fix these kind of attacks. So that's why we need to think from 360-degree view, like what are the pros, what are the cons? If the devices are ready to accept like remote firmware, if they have capability of updating the firmware remotely, what are the pros, what are the cons? So do we have like good security controls? So these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves before implementing security controls in high-stake technologies like medical devices. Having said that, So the medical device can be classified based on invasiveness. That's just one type of classification. So it could be a non-invasive device. It means it could be just a simple curve, like finger curve, like where it's using the bladder to measure blood parameter, or it can use light, like Apple Watch. It can measure some other parameters from your body, or it could be minimally invasive. So it means some like endoscopy. So something gets into your body through minor incision or a cut, or it could be invasive device. So the perfect example would be a pacemaker or implantable. So the invasiveness is a key factor in determining the risk profile of the device. So based on the risk, they have to have different kind of security controls. They have to go through different kind of submission strategy. They have to have follow different kind of submission process. For example, in US, we have 3 different classes, like class 1 being low risk, class 3 being high risk. In EU, we have such classes as well. So the invasiveness is a key factor in determining the risk profile. Let's talk about something what most people overlook. So platform and hardware security features. So these devices are going to be deployed in what we call uncontrolled or hostile environment, where anybody could walk up to your device, take it and put it apart, try to extract the firmware and try to reverse engineer that. For example, they could access the debug interfaces via JTAG and try to modify the boot parameters to boot the Linux into like with the root privileges. Basically, they can bypass all the security controls you have on your software or OS layer. So that's why software security is not going to stop all kinds of attacks. So that's why we need like platform security. So some of the countermeasures are, so the first one will be TEE or TPM. So these are your hardware root of trust, where you can store your passwords or private keys, certificates, or any other sensitive information. So it also enables secure boot, where you are making sure you are loading only trusted modules, firmwares, and only signed codes. So unauthorized codes cannot be executed. It also enables you to have full disk encryption, where you can protect all your data at rest. So it can protect against like offline attacks. And it should also have like anti-clone and anti-tamper properties. Some formats even zero out all the secure storage data if it tries any tampering attempt. So trusted execution environment. So what is it? It's a dedicated area within the host main processor. It's a built-in hardware security mechanism. So it's a very cost-effective alternative to physical HSM. That's because you pay for the processor, so the security feature comes with it. You don't need to pay anything extra like HSM, and you don't need to worry about the engineering cost that goes with the integration with this module. So it's very cheaper. So IoT likes this. Who doesn't like cheaper security? So it's very cost-effective. And one of the well-known implementation in TE is like ARM Trust Zone. It's a security feature in ARM processor. Starting from ARM v7, it got fully adapted. So it's a built-in hardware isolation mechanism. So hardware-backed security feature. So how it's done? It literally splits the processor into 2 different worlds, secure world and non-secure world. So codes in the non-secure world cannot access secure world. So all of them needs to go via proper standardized API calls. There is no direct memory access. So since it's going via proper APIs, so there are a lot of validations, authorization checks going in there, and I'll explain that in the next upcoming slides. So it also provides secure memory and secure peripherals. So it means like you can configure some kind of NAND-based storage, and you can make it accessible only from the trusted side of the processor. So because TE specification does not talk about secure storage. As it says, it's an execution environment where you can run your code, but it doesn't talk anything about the storage. So, but you can tweak it a little bit. You can add your storage. That way you can have your secure application talk to the secure storage. So that's what makes it secure storage. So ARM processor also comes with a trusted firmware. It's a low-level implementation, basically C code to make it possible. So it uses a special instruction called secure monitor call. It's a CPU instruction. That's what's responsible for switching the mode to secure to non-secure and vice versa. So it acts as a gateway between these 2 worlds. So Intel has TXT and AMD has SPM. So it's not just ARM. So both of them have some similar technology, but at the end, all of them provides just secure execution environment for your trusted application. Let's look at some of the common use cases for this. So the first primary function for this is secure key storage, where you can store your keys, certificates, like any other private information. And it can also perform cryptographic operations. So it also supports like major cryptographic algorithms like AES, RSA, It also support like major crypto primitives like a hashing function, digital signature verification. So one of the use case would be if your device is authenticated to any other third-party device module, then you can do this TLS verification, right? So you can offload this TLS verification part to TE. That way, you don't need to expose your private keys. So the application doesn't need to access your private keys to do the TLS verification, because it's all happening in the TE. So you are decoupling the sensitive verification part and putting that in TE. So that's how you should design the system. So you can also use this secure storage as a general purpose storage, where you can store your PHA information, like any other sensitive information that you want to protect. So you can also safeguard your ML models, like the ML models that predict some kind of disease before symptoms appear. For example, cancer or any kind of disease. So you can, because that's the heart of the device. So attackers should not compromise this kind of models, because this is very crucial for the device to function properly. So you can safeguard all these secure models from being reverse engineered by putting that in the TE. And authentication. So if your device has to do some kind of authentication like Face ID, Touch ID, then you can offload that part to TE. That's the other use case. And TE OS. So you need some kind of OS to take advantage of the hardware security feature. So as I talked about Trust Zone, that's a hardware security feature. So you need some kind of OS to make it possible, right? To make it work. So that's why this TE OS comes into the picture. So it's very tiny OS. So they want to keep that way. So because it's very intentional. So because smaller code base equals to less vulnerabilities and less attack surface and more predictable. This has been tested thoroughly they know how it functions. So that's why they want to keep this OS very small as possible. So it provides greater flexibility than TPM, because TPM, it's a separate hardware and it needs to be scoped to meet TCG specification. So it needs to check out some checkbox to be eligible called TP. In TE, like vendors can choose however they want, and they can implement whatever they want to do with the TE. So they can even implement all the TPM functionalities in TE. So vendor, for example, there are a lot of TE OS out there in the market. So Trust Opti, it's an open source TE OS. That's what we'll be looking at today for this device. And Trusty by Google. So most of the smartphones are running an ARM processor. So if it's using Android, so Trusty is behind that. QC by Qualcomm and ZepOS for Apple. So then they are just different type of TEOS doing the same job. So this is the architecture of the device. So Opti is the type of TEOS. So as you see here on the left side, you have RichOS, Linux. On the right side, you have Opti. Both of them are running on the same processor. So, but what you usually see is the what's on the left side. So just Linux or any other Android or any other software. But there is also another OS that's running parallelly, but that doesn't have like rich interfaces. So whatever you're seeing in the green box are your custom application that you build according to a use case of the product. For example, you have some PHA records, then your application can send that PHA records to your trusted application, where your trusted application can decrypt that information. So your trusted application can extract the keys from the hardware resource like secure storage or any other cryptographic object. Then it can extract the keys and uses that key to decrypt the PHA records and send back to your application on Linux. This way, your application doesn't need to know the private key to do the encryption or decryption. That's how you are decoupling this entire process. So on the left-hand side, so it needs to go via global platform APIs. So on the right side, it has to go via global platform APIs. I'll explain that in the next slide. So then it comes to TE driver. So it's basically sequence of function calls. So then TE driver again trigger the SMC secure monitor call instruction, which is responsible for switching the mode from non-secure to the secure. And then it's going to the TA trusted application. Trusted application are isolated between each other. So even if they want to talk to each other, they need to go via the function calls. So SMC again here it's access a gateway, and that's how it works. The global platform APIs, what are they? So in order to enable secure and seamless, also on the interoperable communication from your Linux application to the trusted application, global platform defines some set of APIs in Opti. So these APIs are going to make the job easier for developers to develop trusted application, because we have a lot of different trusted application TEOS, right? Like Opti, OS, QC, Trusty. So if the developer can write trusted application, that can also work in other trusted execution environment OS with very minimal code change. So that's the goal. So that's why they have standardized this whole process to make this job easier. So there are two sets of APIs here. So first one is the client APIs. These APIs are used by your application in Linux to talk to the TE side. For example, invoke command, initialize contacts. So these are responsible for establishing a session to your trusted application. They can identify the proper trusted application, then initiate the call. And then second set is TE core API. These APIs are used by your trusted application to talk to the actual cryptographic service. This is what's used to generate the keys to talk to the secure storage and stuff. This is the main set of APIs. You need to develop this carefully. So for example, generate key function is used to generate the key directly, allocate transient object. Then there are a lot of other core APIs. So then introduction to PKCS11. So PKCS11 is a way to interact with any hardware security model that uses or stores or manipulate cryptographic objects like keys. So it's a platform independent standard because it uses object-based approach, which means even if you have one HSM, let's say you have one HSM from one manufacturer and you have another HSM from another manufacturer. So your client-side application doesn't need to know the difference between them because it uses a concept called object. So according to them, it's just treated as an object. So there are a lot of objects like data, key, certificate, public key, private key, secret key. There are a lot of different objects. So this is again to make it like technology independence and platform independence. So that's the goal. So libraries are available in common programming languages like C, Python, Go, Java. So your client-side application can import that library and uses that to talk to actual hardware security model. So this is the so this diagram illustrates the PKCS11, how it's used as a trusted application itself in this particular device. So on the left-hand side block, that's your rich application, rich execution environment where you have your Linux running on. On the right side, you have your Opti running on, and both of them are running on the same ARM A7 processor. So on the left-hand side, you have your client application like OpenSSL or PKCS11 tool. So they are your command line utility to talk to your trusted application. So when you initiate the command using PKCS11 front-end application, then that calls libtk-tec, which implements global platform client API. Again, as I said earlier, it has to go through the proper API. So that library is the one that's implementing the client API. Then it redirects a call to Opti driver, then that's switching the mode by SMC instruction, then it goes to core, then core redirects the call to corresponding trusted application. Then though PKCS11 commands that you put in the first step will get unwrapped here, and this TA will understand that command because PKC is also implemented there. Then that does one-on-one mapping to the internal core API. Then the core API is implemented in libut library. So then it redirects the call to the secure storage. So in this case, this device uses Linux file system as a secure storage. But this is not a security issue because even though it's stored in the common file system, they stay encrypted and it also has integrity protection. So it's a well-known implementation supported by global platform. So trust me when I say this, most of the devices don't even have this kind of TE or secure architecture. I'm talking about like 10%, top 10% sophisticated device, yet it's vulnerable. Okay, as I explained earlier in this step, this blue color block TA, that's a PKCS11 TA. So this PKCS11 as a trusted application, how it works. So this creates an emulated smart card. It creates an emulated HSM. So it's not a physical HSM. As you can see here, so there are 3 slots. If it were a physical HSM, so each slot would refer to each physical device. So in this case, you would have to have 3 physical devices to come up with the 3 slots. So in this case, there is no physical HSM. This trusted application emulates this concept. So your application sees this as a 3 physical device, but all of them have same EUID. This is TA, trusted application unique ID. All of them have same EUID. So this is emulation. This is the single application creating multiple emulated device. So there are 3 slots. So these slots are there is authentication to these slots. So under each slot, you can store cryptographic objects like keys, certificate, PHA, anything under each slots. So these slot authentication are defined at the user level. It means if you have like file application running under some simple Unix or Linux user. So all these application will have access to this particular slot. So it doesn't go any granular than that. So that's the key limitation that developers should keep in mind while designing this solution. So all the application under the same account will have access to a particular slot. So there are two authentication types. The first one is pin based. So there are two pins, user pin, the secure officer pin. So user pin is the pin that application needs to know to access the slot. Without the pin, you cannot access the object stored in the particular slot. Then security officer. Security officer is to manage these user pins. So basically administrative tasks to create or delete or change the user pins. Both of these pins should be kept and stored securely. The second authentication type is identity-based authentication. It means you are tying the Linux user account to the particular slot. If you want to eliminate the pin concept completely, this is what you have to do because there is no pin involved here. So it uses Linux EUID to do the mapping. So on the runtime, if your application tries to access a particular slot, your Linux application will convert that user account to EUID, then does the mapping. If it passes, then it will allow the user to access the slot. So that's one thing to note in authentication type. The second one is the object access policy. So each object carries a set of flags. These flags are basically nothing but the attributes, like set of attributes. So these attributes define what operation you can do on the particular object. For example, if you mark such one object as exportable, you can export that object. So you need to set this carefully because if a private key is set as exportable, then they can export the private key. So there are a lot of access flags. You need to set those carefully. And some of them are applicable to some kind of object. Some of them are not applicable to some kind of object. For example, data objects doesn't have any exportable. By default, it can be exportable. So this is what you need to know. So this is the actual screenshot here. And the first diagram, I used a PKCS11 tool that already existed in the machine. I am just an NDA user. It's not a root account. Then I use the module libckTEC. It's just a standard PKCS11 command. So that module implements the client API. Then I'm getting into the slot 0. Then I'm extracting the type data object, read object, and I'm doing read operation. Then I'm extracting the data here, extracted. So this is what I did. Here, as you can see, it's asking for a pin. Please enter your pin. If you look at fourth line, it's asking for a pin. So I tried to use different pin. I tried to brute force my way in. I did a lot of things, but I couldn't do it. But I went back to basics. Then I tried just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. It worked. So yeah, so sometimes you have to stick with the basics. Yeah, I spent a week trying to do that. Then on the second diagram, so as you can see, I'm listing out all the objects, like what all exist in this particular slot. I'm just putting uppercase O. It means I'm listing whatever objects that present in the slot 0. So I'm entering the pin again. So as you can see, it's a private key object that's stored, that's marked as extractable. As you can see, then there's a public key object. Then there is a data object that's modified. That's actually PH record right there, what you're seeing. And yeah, here, developers might think, okay, data object, I'm not marking this as exportable. But what they need to know is, by default, data objects are exportable. They just don't know that. So you can literally export the data from your slot 0. That's exactly what I did on the first diagram. Okay, let's talk about other common weaknesses I usually find in this kind of architecture. So one is a weak or insecure pin management. Sometimes, as I said earlier, it's just a VC pins. Sometimes whatever pins that are present in the default documentation, they forget to change the pins. And sometimes you need to store these pins in the flat file because where your application should have access to. Otherwise, your application cannot get to the pin and it cannot access the slot. So you have to design it such way. So if you store that pin in the flat file and you don't have proper ACL hardening on the file, then it can lead to security vulnerability. Because even if let's say if an authenticated user has access to the particular file where you store the pin, they can get the pin and tries to access it. So as I said earlier, sometimes the trusted application doesn't enforce like brute force protection. So it means you can brute force your way in. So and hard coded pin. So application just stores this pin hard coded in the source code. It means you can just without proper obfuscation. It means you can extract the firmware and tries to reverse engineer. You can just run strings command. You'll get the pin and access the slot and access all the objects. And in the second type of authentication, where I mentioned you literally map the user account to the slot. So in the type of authentication, what you need to keep in mind is over the time, you lose track of the application you are adding in scope. So over the time, you will add more application under the same user account. You lose track of it, then that leads to privilege swap. Like it will have broad privileges. So your application will have like a lot of application will have access to where they are not supposed to. And then the second common weakness is improper configuration of the object access control flags, like I explained earlier. So you need to set these flags very carefully. You need to, for example, if it's not exportable, then you should not make it exportable. So these kind of access flags you need to set carefully. Otherwise, it can lead to catastrophic security incidents. Okay, detection and monitoring. So just because this OPTI hidden deep inside the layer and it lacks rich interface to like Linux to make it work with, so doesn't mean you have to leave these trusted application unmonitored. So because it's not possible for you to add like more features to OPTI. It's not possible for you to add like extend the complex workflows. So, but that's intentional. So it doesn't mean you have to leave it unmonitored. So there is a way to do that. So the concept is called pseudo trusted application. So think of it like a privileged container where your container is running with higher privileges than other containers. So that's what exactly it's. So it's built into the OPTI code. It's built into the kernel. It has same privilege as the kernel. So there is no out-of-the-box solution for detection pseudo TA provided by OPTI, but you can build one according to your use case. So in order to do that, you just need to your other trusted application operations, like what it's accessing, what's your baseline. You need to set your baseline, then you can easily find anomalies. If you are able to come up with a list of operation performed on under a specific time frame, during specific time frame, you can literally set that as a baseline and build a pseudo trusted application on top of that to detect the anomaly if it goes above that limit. After that, if it's finding any detection, if it's finding any anomalies, then you can have that pseudo TA report back to your Linux application where you have like full featured monitoring strategies. So via TE supplicant. So you can have your pseudo TA report back to your Linux application via this TE supplicant. Okay, I have built this open source tool to make it easier to find these kind of vulnerabilities in this kind of architecture. So it's just open source. I just posted in GitHub. So there are a lot of cool features about that. So you can brute force that's all kind of enumeration, like and it also checks for object. If its authentication is successful, it can extract that for you. It basically does all kind of automation. Then it also scans for like sensitive log files across your Linux system to see if it's storing anything sensitive. And I'm also trying to build a wrapper around this PKCS11 to enforce app-based, because as I said earlier, it doesn't go any granular than user-based. So that authentication is at user level. So I'm trying to build a wrapper to enforce app-based. Okay, I think we have reached the last slide. So challenges in enforcing strong security controls. So the first one I see is detection and monitoring. So detection and monitoring is almost impossible in some medical devices because these devices cannot be connected out to internet. It cannot be connected to a backend server. So it lacks real-time monitoring because some hospitals are sensitive to that. So even if they allow you to do that, you have to be very, very careful what you are getting out of your device. It cannot have any sensitive information like patient records or any other ID. The second one is these IoT devices are running on very limited computing environment. So some security functions are computationally expensive. So thanks to cryptographic accelerators like SHA and AES, that problem is slowly going away, but it still exists. So that's why security should be lightweight and efficient. And the third one is connectivity, as I explained earlier. So lack of connectivity leads to a lot of problems. And legacy systems. So some devices are decades years old. So when that devices were built, security was not into the product. So trying to fit security right now creates a lot of financial and technical limitations. And safety versus security trade-off. That's very important concept because you need to prioritize safety over security. So as I explained in the first slide, if it were implantable, like what would you do? Like, would you make your device setting remote commands, like updating remote firmware? That's a priority. That's a trade-off you have to do. Then some devices can only be updated via manual procedures. So some devices can only be updated via USB, in-person, it doesn't have, maybe it doesn't have remote connection, or it's very old. So that's still applicable. So it stops your process of issuing security releases, even though you have issued new releases, patches, software patches. So it's not possible for those devices to take them in. And lack of secure by design culture. So security should not be built on top of the devices. Instead, it should be built alongside the product development. So some engineering teams, like I have seen, they don't have like proper secure by design culture. Instead, their security is just like a checkbox to them. And that's what exactly should have changed, should change. Right. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for attending. So this is my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. So let's talk about it. Sounds good.